that to expire in September. Now, we all know the pause was put in place at the beginning of the pandemic. It was already extended once by the President. It's proven to be one of the most effective steps that the government has taken to help Americans get through the health and economic crises created by COVID-19. That's why last month, Senator Warren, Representative Pressley, and I, along with many of our state, Senate, and House colleagues, sent a letter to President Biden asking to extend this pause to give Americans more time to get back on their feet. COVID created severe hardship for some, threw many others off their stride. To make borrowers repay their debts now would be unfair, would be harsh, and in many instances would be cruel. People were thrown off their stride by COVID. Give them a chance to recover. Wait till the spring. That's all. Well, that's not the only thing we're asking, but that's the first thing we're asking. We are also continuing to call on President Biden to use his existing legal authority to cancel up to $50,000 of student debt. This pause has actually shown how important canceling student debt is to borrowers and to our economy. We've heard about how being saddled with this debt has affected millions of Americans' lives on so many choices that they'd like to make. They're not able to pursue the career they want. They're putting off getting married or starting a family. They aren't able to open a business, buy a house, even buy a car, which many of them need to get to work. So we know how much of a difference extending the pause makes. Well, 10 times over, canceling $50,000 in debt would be even more important and helpful to these folks who are borrowers, to get the economy going, and to deal with the racial inequality which student debt has exacerbated. Resuming these payments could stall our country's economic recovery. It could bring millions of loan borrowers to the edge of financial crisis. If the pause on student loan payment isn't extended, the average borrower would have to pay about $400 a month. Just figure that out. You're getting back on your feet from COVID. You may have had a loss of income. You may have missed some rent payments. You may have have to put off other things, your credit rating. $400 a month is much too much right now for so many people. It's $400 a month that can't cover groceries or books or rent or supplies for kids as they go back to school. In short term, it's going to mean more people will struggle to recover from the pandemic. We've had enough struggling. In the long term, extending the pause and eventually canceling student loan debt would be a bold step towards economic opportunity for millions of Americans and for our whole economy. There's hardly a better way to give a shot in the arm to this economy than this. As I said, canceling student debt would also, a passion of the three of us, would deal with decades of economic injustice and racial inequality. Student debt falls disproportionately on black and brown borrowers, many of whom are first-time college graduates. Canceling up to $50,000 in their families. Canceling up to $50,000 in debt would close the racial wealth gap between black and white borrowers by 25%, between Latino and white borrowers by 27%. So with all this good, all President Biden has to do is flick his pen, sign it. Make America a happier, better, more prosperous place. Senator Warren, Representative Pressley, and I are going to keep fighting until this happens. I'm going to turn it over to Senator Warren, who's been a complete champion on this. And I reminded my colleagues here, this is my mask that I wear all the time, you know that. Cancel student debt. I wore fight anti-Asian violence. That passed. I wore save the restaurants. That passed. I wore save the stages. That passed. We hope to have the same karma today.
Well, thank you, Mr. Leader. It is a real privilege to be here with two such terrific partners in this fight. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Over 30 million Americans will have a bill coming due in about 2 months. The payment pause is running out on student loan debt payments. The size of these payments for many borrowers is the size of their rent, their car payments, groceries, child care. That's going to put a lot of people making hard choices. Do they pay the student loan debt, or do they keep up with their car payments? Do they pay the student loan debt, or do they keep up with their child care? Now, those are hard choices, and remember, the student loan debt system is set up to make our federal government a tough creditor. People will see their wages garnished, even Social Security checks get garnished. Penalties and fees that mount up mean that someone who has borrowed $10,000, if they start to fall behind, can suddenly discover they owe 12 or 15 or even more. The choice about what to pay will fall hardest on the most vulnerable among us. 40% of those with student loan debt do not have a diploma. The majority of Black borrowers do not have a diploma. They are paying for college on a high school graduate's wages. Seniors, people who are unemployed, will also be put to hard choices. Pew recently did a study and determined that about 2/3 of borrowers are not ready for payments to resume, that they will find it difficult to manage their debts. These people live with a sword hanging over their heads, and every day that goes by, that sword draws a little closer. This is a matter of economic justice. It is a matter of racial justice. The President of the United States can remove this sword. The President can prevent this pain. The President can cancel $50,000 in student loan debt. He can wipe out all debt for about 36 million Americans, that's 85% of borrowers, and make life a whole lot easier for the remaining 15%. So we're here today to say, tick-tock, tick-tock, Mr. President. Millions of Americans ask you now to pick up a pen and cancel student loan debt, to pick up a pen and extend the payment pause, to pick up a pen and make their lives better. Thank you. And with that, I yield to my partner from Massachusetts, Congresswoman Pressley. Ayanna?
Thank you. Indeed. Tick-tock. Pick up the pen. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here today, and to my colleagues, Senate Majority Leader Schumer, Senator Warren, grateful for your close partnership as we work to deliver robust, long overdue relief to the millions of student loan borrowers across our country. As policymakers, we have a duty to do everything in our power to fundamentally improve the lives of the people we represent. Now, even before this pandemic hit, this was a $1.7 trillion student debt crisis. $1.7 trillion. That's a lot of people crushed and burdened. Millions of borrowers across the country with student debt. People like the grandmother who is still paying off her student loans on a fixed income. Like the new parent struggling to manage the skyrocketing costs of childcare, rent, and her student loan payments. Or the teacher who fears losing his teaching license because he can't come up with that monthly student loan payment, not even the minimum. And the disproportionate impact of the student debt crisis has weighed heaviest on Black and brown borrowers in the Massachusetts 7th and across the country, who, due to generations of what I would characterize as precise, intentional policy violence, have been forced to take on higher rates of student debt for just a chance, the same degree, as our white peers. President Biden has an opportunity and a responsibility to address the hurt and harm these communities are feeling by using his executive authority to cancel $50,000 in federal student loan debt. Doing so is one of the most effective ways he can provide sweeping relief to millions of families while helping to reduce the racial wealth gap and lay the groundwork for a truly just, equitable, and long-term recovery. This is a crisis created through policy decisions. We have a responsibility to address it head on. In this moment of ongoing crisis, our families need every bit of help they can get. We need to alleviate their hurt. In just over 2 months, student debt payments are scheduled to resume for millions of people across this country. Families who have already been struggling to make ends meet throughout this pandemic through no fault of their own because of a pandemic-induced recession. They will have an additional bill at their doorstep, many that are the equivalent of a mortgage payment. That's why last month we wrote to the president urging him to extend the pause on federal student loan payments through March of next year. Extending this critical payment pause will provide a crucial additional layer of protections for the millions of borrowers, disproportionately women and people of color, who currently face a disastrous financial cliff at the end of September. It doesn't have to be this way. Canceling student debt is sound economic policy that will allow the average borrower to put hundreds of dollars a month towards paying for rent, buying groceries, purchasing diapers, baby formula, and other essential goods. Earlier this month, we saw reports that officials at the Education Department support extending this payment. They support extending this payment pause, so we urge President Biden to act with urgency. Failure to act would be unconscionable. It would undermine our economic recovery and only exacerbate the hurt and harm student borrowers are experiencing. But make no mistake, as we continue the work of building a just and equitable recovery from the current economic crisis, broad-based, across the board, and permanent, student debt cancellation must remain front and center. The people, including the broad and diverse coalition that elected President Biden, demand, deserve, and require nothing less. Let's get this done.
I want to thank both of my colleagues. We'll take questions on this subject. We're not taking other subjects. Go ahead, DeBois.
Senator, you're asking for executive action today.
Yes.
But you're also proposing legislative action to create free community college, expand Pell Grants, all of that in the reconciliation bill. Right now, that process is bogged down because the bipartisan process is bogged down.
Only this, I'm going to answer go ahead. I'm sorry to meet.
When does it become time to say enough of that process?
I'm going to speak later after our lunch, but we're making good progress on both tracks. Yes.
This is not the first time that you all have presented this, and I'm just curious what your most current conversations with the Biden administration on this topic have looked like. Has his position migrated at all?
I believe that they are understanding every week how important this is for the economy, for the people of America. Yes, I think we've made progress. In fact, some of the arguments that they used to make, they no longer make. One is it'll get taxed. We took care of that in the ARP bill. Another is they don't have the legal authority. We don't hear much of that anymore because we think they do. So we're making progress, and si se puede. We're going to keep at it. If any of you want to join in, feel free. Yes.
So to piggyback off of that question, you've held press events asking for President Biden to pick up the pen and cancel $50,000 student loan debt. You've held other events. What's different right now? Is there something else you can be doing to push President Biden?
It gets worse and worse, but we have this cancellation coming up that we need him to do. You know, this idea of extending the moratorium, and we think once he thinks of extending the moratorium, the very same reasons to extend the moratorium are reasons to cancel debt. Right. Did you want to use some?
I was just going to say, your question's a good question. What's different right now is that we're 2 months away from payments restarting for more than 30 million Americans. That's a real on-the-ground impact for families that are struggling. The president can avoid that, and that's important both family by family, but also for our economy. So we're staring down a deadline, not of our making, but the president's making. And we're asking that the payment pause be extended, but more critically, we are asking that he go ahead and cancel student loan debt. Remember, he has the power to extend the payment pause. We know that because he's done it. And that same power is his to cancel student loan debt.
He can do one, he can do the other.
And I would just add, these crises are layered. And so, as we see what is happening with the Delta variant, and we have not seen, we're fighting for, I certainly have been, to extend the eviction moratorium as well. People have to remain safely housed. They should not be trying to decide between paying a student loan bill or whether or not they should be paying rent to remain safely housed while we are still in the midst of a pandemic. And might I also add on the racial justice components, because those have been challenged. As someone who grew up in a redline community, and like 85% of Black student borrowers felt I had no choice but to borrow in order to pursue higher education, in light of the fact that Black families, because of policy violence, were deprived the ability to build generational wealth, and Black student borrowers default at 5 times the rate of our white counterparts. That's not abstract for me, that is personal. That has been my own experience. And so the White House has continually espoused and expressed a commitment to racial justice. So this is both an economic justice issue. This is an easy lever to pull and to exact as a part of a recovery strategy to jumpstart the economy, to alleviate a burden for families, and also gets us one step closer to actualizing racial justice. And finally, as you have seen in recent days, the president of historically Black colleges and universities have been using those ARP funds for canceling student debt, which I think further makes the case that they understand the burden that this has disproportionately on Black families. And so we need to follow their lead. We should be being the pace setters. But at the very least, we need to follow their lead.
One other thing I'd say in answer to your question, support's growing. We hear more about this now than we heard 3-4 months ago. It's not fading. I'll go to online with 100 people, say a church group. This won't even be the subject. It'll be brought up.
That's right.
It's growing. Last question.
Do you think that President Biden and his team are sort of waiting before doing debt cancellation because they don't want to upset all the negotiations here over the trillion?
They haven't said that to us, and we say the sooner the better. Okay? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.